Hello, and welcome to the Gallagher Profiles in Confidence podcast. My name is John Neshes, and I'm the Director of Partnership Marketing and Content Development here at Gallagher. I'm joined today by Chris Carlin, who is a New York sports TV and radio personality, along with being the voice of Rutgers football. He recently joined ESPN New York Radio, where he hosts the 7 to 10 evening show, and we'll be speaking about his career and some interesting storylines around the New York sports landscape and the role confidence plays as they continue to unfold. So welcome, Chris.
Good to be here. Appreciate it, John.
Yeah, so I'm really excited to have you on this podcast. There's so much going on right now in New York sports, and also having followed your career for many years, I thought that you would be a perfect person to talk to as it corresponds to Gallagher, where we're able to provide confidence to our clients as they move forward in their business. And I saw some correlation there and thought this would be a great opportunity to investigate that. So if you don't mind, if we can start from where you started, because, and you can correct me, I go as far back as when you were producing the Mike and the Mad Dog show on WFAN, and that led to some really incredible upward mobility for you. And I'd love if you can just jump into that a little bit and fill us in.
Sure. It's funny. My career did not get off to the best of starts. When I was trying to find some work, graduating college, I sent out 100 resumes and did not get one interview out of it. But I happened to be able to get an internship with WFAN in the fall of 1995. And from there, it was a place that I just knew I wanted to be. I had grown up listening to it. I had delivered for a drugstore in high school and during college breaks just to make money. And when I did, I was listening to it all the time, like in the Mad Dog and all the shows and such. And having spent time there, I was just thrilled to get the opportunity to be around these iconic figures, but I knew it's where I wanted to be. And at the end of it, so many times you see people that are afraid to go after what they want or not aggressive enough. And I mean, it really plays into that confidence thought, because I went into my boss after this internship and just said simply, I have to work here. What do I do to do that? And they had liked me enough to the point where they were willing to hire me part-time, and I put in all the work to turn out to get a job full-time as the producer of Mike and the Mad Dog at age 24. And for me, that was just borderline ridiculous that it was able to happen at that point, especially for somebody with little to no experience in that. But that was an opportunity for me that just really built confidence in myself, because
yeah. And if I can interject just for a second, for those not in the know, Mike and the Mad Dog was the number one show in New York forever. It was really where you went to get your afternoon drive sports fix, and just an amazing show with an amazing run. So that was really quite an accomplishment at 24 years old.
It was mind-boggling to be sure. It was regarded as the best sports talk show in the country, and there was never an argument about it, ironically, because what do we do in sports radio? We argue about things. There was never an argument as to who was the best when it came to that. So, for me, it was one of those situations where it was an incredible challenge at this young age, and you had to deliver, because you're not going to be the weak link in what is an already remarkably successful show. So it just, for me, did nothing but build confidence when I was able to really show those guys that I was capable of handling the job and willing to do whatever I had to do to get the job done.
Yeah, and I can imagine that both Mike Francesa and Mad Dog Russo were not the easiest people to work for. I mean, they were they had to be really tough on a producer, and their show, it was, as you said, number one in the entire country. So their expectations must have been tremendous for the job that you had.
They were demanding. There's no question about it, but it made me better. Every day you went in realizing that you had to try to top what happened the day before. And some days, frankly, your entire mood for the rest of the day could be affected by whether or not somebody called you back. And that's an entirely frustrating situation to be in, because there are times where you just can't do anything about it. But at the same time, you go and you figure out how to get that done if it's not happening. You can't just sit there and try to hope that you're going to get that phone call back. You have to go and chase that person down and find exactly where they were. I can remember one time in particular looking for the Giants manager, Dusty Baker, at the time, and calling literally 40 to 50 hotels in Atlanta to find where he was before I finally did, and I found him with about 10 minutes left in the show.
That's
yeah, I mean, it sounds like a tedious task, and it is, but it's what had to be done to get the job done.
Right, all right. So when did you make the transition from being behind the scenes as a producer to actually being an on-air personality on WFAN? And then from there, and again, I might have the timeline off a little bit, you ended up being an on-air TV personality for SNY, which is the home of the New York Mets.
I did. I made the transition. First opportunities I got were in 2000 and 2001, and my boss at the time, just getting sporadic chances to host shows on WFAN because I had done a great job in other instances for him off the air, was willing to give me a chance. But he hated me on the air, absolutely hated me, thought I was awful because I was too worried about everything that you needed to know, at least in my mind, to do the show, not wanting to get caught off guard. But I remember specifically having done 3 or 4 or 5 shows, none of them received well by management, and getting an opportunity to do 1 or 2 more and just thinking, this isn't going anywhere. I'm not very good at this, so I'm just going to go and let it fly and just be myself. And that's what I did. I just had fun. I made fun of the callers. I, didn't really care what happened anymore. And as you would expect, fittingly, the next day, my boss came to me and said, that's exactly what I've been looking for.
Do you ever go back and listen to those tapes now?
Oh, God, no. I am hoping that those tapes were burned. I personally don't have them. But, it's funny that that was the case, but I have lived by the idea since that if you just let me be an idiot, I'm going to excel. And you let me be myself, I'm going to excel. And it sounds funny, but that really served me well. And I had confidence in who I was. And that really turned a corner for me in my career. So I would get more and more opportunities, and eventually full-time at WFAN on air. And then 8 years later, in 2008, SNY came to me after I had been on as a guest a few times, and they wanted to start a show called Loudmouths around myself and Adam Shine. And I had never thought of myself as a television person. I don't have the typical TV person handsome, good looks, but at the same time, I knew what I was about, and I knew what I could bring to the table. And, they ended up wanting to hire me full-time to host their Mets pre- and post-game show, which I did for 5 years and stayed on TV for 9 years.
Wow.
Just as happy as could be because they were allowing me to be myself.
Yeah, that's really that's incredible to have that long a run in a market like New York. And by the way, the run is still going on, but at that point in time was really something to be proud of. It's amazing. And somewhere along the line, you also became the voice of Rutgers football.
Mm-hmm.
I can remember your very famous quote, "Pandemonium in Piscataway," after an I believe it was an ESPN national game, correct? That they won and it was probably the biggest win in their history at that point.
It is, yeah. In 2006, they were undefeated, as was Louisville, and the Cardinals were third in the country at the time, and Rutgers came back from 25-7 down to win that game 28-25. And it was the biggest win in school history. And what's so funny to me about that is, I got affiliated, I joined Rutgers, in 2001 when Greg Schiano became the head coach. And I started as a sideline reporter, and 3 years later, I became the play-by-play voice and have been doing it ever since. Prior to that, what was funny about it is that a year earlier, I had applied for a job in a very same vein at a much smaller school in the middle of Pennsylvania and didn't get the job, and thought to myself, what am I doing here? But it's that belief in yourself that just allows you to continue to function and push and make it happen. And a year later, I'm in a much better situation in a much bigger market.
Yeah, it's a great part of your resume, and sticking on the Rutgers theme. I mean, Greg Schiano is back after leaving Rutgers and working in the NFL for a little bit. He was a head coach of the Bucks. He's been an assistant coach in a couple of places, I believe. He's back, but he's back now with Rutgers being in the Big Ten, which is not exactly the Big East, which is what Rutgers was in prior. I mean, this is the Big Ten, and Greg Schiano's got to have a tremendous amount of confidence to come back to Rutgers, which is, let's be honest, not been very good the last few years, and expect to bring that program to one of high regard within the Big Ten, which is a legendary conference.
He is one of the smartest and most confident people I've ever known. And I think that what really kind of ties that together here is here's a guy that has done it before. And when I tell you that when he came in and was introduced in December of 2000 as the head coach, the cupboard was bare. There wasn't any kind of facilities or anything. And Rutgers was playing in the Big East, yes, but you also had the University of Miami, and you had Virginia Tech still in the Big East at the time, and these were perennial powerhouses. At the time, Miami's 2001 team might be the greatest college football team of all time. Mm-hmm. So you're facing these teams a couple times a year, and you had to build this program from nothing. And he was able to do that in the span of 5 years and turn it into that team that finished that year ranked 7th in the country. And it was just a remarkable accomplishment. And a lot of it had to do with his confidence. Recruits bought into what he was selling. It wasn't an arrogance about him. It's just, we're going to do this, and we want you to be a part of making history. And you talk about his return now. What's so important is not just him understanding what the Big Ten is all about and his confidence in being able to do this again, but the confidence that the fan base has in him. When it appeared as if he may not be coming back, there was a revolt among the fans because they were so upset to not get this proven commodity at their institution that they knew could get the job done, and somebody that would give them the confidence that was going to happen, but also would then in turn, because they believed in him so much, are going to now give him as much time as he needs. They're going to be patient because the accomplishments are there before, and they know what this coach is capable of.
Yeah, that's going to be an amazing story to follow over the coming years, because if he can get Rutgers back to respectability in the Big Ten, he'll just be a legendary figure.
There's no question.
in the tri-state area. Now, moving on to some other coaches in New York that have really turned their teams around, and you've really got to hand it to people like Barry Trotz, who came to the Islanders. The Islanders went through an ownership change. They brought in Lou Lamoriello, one of the best general managers in the history of hockey. And then they bring in Stanley Cup winning coach Barry Trotz, and all of a sudden, everything changes for the New York Islanders. How do you explain that?
I think it's pretty easy. I think it's players understanding who they are now following, and it's somebody who has been to where they want to go. Now, is talent the most important factor? Of course it is. You have to have very good players to great players to compete in the National Hockey League. But leadership in the NHL, I think, is such a remarkably underrated aspect when it comes to coaching. So Barry Trotz comes in fresh off of winning a Stanley Cup and takes over, and look at where this team is. This is not a coincidence. You know, Lou Lamoriello was the architect of 3 Stanley Cup winning teams with the New Jersey Devils. Players understand what these guys have done before. They know what it looks like. They know what it smells like to compete for a championship and what it actually takes in that locker room. They know what those teams need to be. And I think what's just so impressive to me about that is how quickly it's happened to turn this franchise that was just in the doldrums for such a long time, ever since their glory run in the early 80s, back into a Stanley Cup contender. And I think so much of that has to do with the confidence of the general manager in Lou Lamoriello and the coach in Barry Trotz.
Yeah, I would agree with you. With the new arena under construction in Belmont, I think we're just seeing the beginning of what will hopefully be a long run for the Islanders. And once the Rangers get back to where they normally are, that rivalry will be back to being sparked, heated, and something really intense for New Yorkers to follow.
And when it is, there is nothing better. When the Rangers and Islanders are both good and those organizations hate each other, there is nothing better than that rivalry in New York sports. And I think it's an aspect that the Rangers are starting to get back a little bit. They are building back toward the top, but when they do get there and these two teams can compete as many times as they do during the year, it's going to be something special.
Yeah, I can't wait. It really is something amazing when they're on the ice together, and it's so heated. That is going to be really, really great. I've got one more area I just wanted to get your thoughts on, Chris. And New York has just always been a baseball crazy town, and spring training is not far away. And look, both the Yankees and the Mets have good teams. The Mets had a nice second half of the season, allowing them to finish over 500, and we're playing those meaningful games into September, which was great. And of course, you've got the Yankees, who are always a powerhouse. And I think a lot of people were surprised, not surprised maybe, but really, really pleased with how Aaron Boone led them. What do you know, or what can you tell us about how they lead? What sort of inner confidence do they have that with the Yankees will allow them to continue to be successful, and they're going to be challenging for the World Series this year, and the Mets, who are hoping to challenge for the division and maybe a wild card?
Well, I think the first thing that you have to look at with both of them is the immense pressure that comes with these two jobs. It can't be overlooked what they deal with on a day-to-day basis, and nobody can truly appreciate it until you see it up close and personal, the demands on their time in these jobs, and the critical eye with which the New York sports fan looks at every single move a manager makes. Let's start with Aaron Boone. When you look at the New York Yankees, success has always been defined by winning a world championship. They have not done that yet under him, but I don't think there's any question that they will, because I think you look at how he defends his players, how he supports them. He's been one of them in this situation before. He's got one of the great home runs in the history of the New York Yankees in 2003 in Game 7 when he hit a walk-off home run off of Tim Wakefield to send them to the World Series against the hated Red Sox in that ALCS. So he's got instant credibility there. And Aaron Boone was not a guy that was one of the all-time great players, but he also was a guy, he was somebody that everybody related to, everybody liked in the locker room, and everybody respected for his work ethic and how he understood the game. And that's why he got this job. And I think you've seen in the first 2 years instances where his players respond to how he manages them. Can you think of one instance the last couple of years where there's been real controversy over the manager and his players in the Bronx?
No.
I can't.
No,
I can't. And
not.
the reason is the players' confidence in him. He's a stoic individual out front publicly in that he doesn't joke around a whole lot, but behind the scenes, he is a guy with a great sense of humor. He's remarkably balanced in who he is. And I think the players see that. And they also know that he was one of them. He's been in their shoes. He's been in this instance, and he knows what that's about. And I think back to last year, just the fact that he had an argument that turned out to be rather boisterous behind home plate with the home plate umpire when he was defending his players in the strike zone, and just how good they are. Players respond to that. It's not necessarily about the emotion. It's about the sentiment behind the emotion. And the sentiment behind his emotion of exploding in that spot where he called his players savages, I'll paraphrase there, in the box. The sentiment was really his belief in them, their comfortability in chaos. That's what a coach I know used to want his players to be, comfortable in chaos. Those guys look like they are as cool as a cucumber when things are at their nuttiest, and that's an incredibly important trait for a manager to have.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more, and you know what? I think it's going to be a very fun and exciting summer in New York with these two baseball teams.
I absolutely can't wait.
Yeah, so you know what, Chris, this has been wonderful. That's all I got for you today. I want to thank you so much for participating in our Gallagher Profiles in Confidence podcast. Best of luck to you moving forward, and we'll be in touch.
John, I appreciate that so much. Thank you for having me.